Okay, so in the last podcast, I talked a little bit about the objects themselves, and probably by the end of that podcast, you were no clearer really about the true meaning of this poem. And I think that's the whole point. The whole point is Simon Armitage doesn't try and give you the absolute answer. You can't get to the end of the poem and think, aha, I understand exactly who this man was, because we just don't really learn very much. We have clues, we have hints, we can maybe possibly piece together that he was married and he took his wedding ring off, but maybe he was mugged, maybe he was murdered and the ring was stolen. We just don't know. We never will, because he's dead. He can't answer us and he can't tell us who he was or why he died or what the circumstances were. But when we look at the language in a little bit more detail, we can see that it is shot through with ending, with death. The words themselves, expiry, slashed, mortis. Mortis is also called a mortis deadlock, because mort, as you know, is French for dead. Stopped, final, beheaded. Lots and lots of words there which deal with endings, which deal with things coming to a conclusion. So even within the objects that this man has on him, there's a sense of the objects themselves having a finality to them, an ending to them, as if they, in his death, are no longer able to tell you anything about the man. That with him dying comes their ending as well. That the library card ends. That the diary is slashed and it seems like a whole section has been removed. That the watch has stopped. Is that stopped at the moment of his death? Well, probably not. It's probably more likely that it's carried on for a little bit longer, but then it has died. We also look at the endings of the lines and at the rhyme, because the rhyme is quite final as well. It's really hard to write about rhyme. I'm aware of that. It's one of those things that most people really struggle with. But if you can every now and again say one clever thing about rhyme, it does help. Never just say that lines 1 and 2 rhyme and lines 3 and 4 rhyme, because anyone could see that. The trained monkey could probably see that there's rhyme. In order to actually get any sort of marks from rhyme, you do need to say what effect it has. But look at the endings of some of these words. Exactly, expiry, stamped, frank, demand, hand, fist, list. The endings themselves are quite final, they're quite definite, and I think the rhyme at the end of these lines itself rounds the lines off in quite an abrupt way. It doesn't really tie the objects together. I mean, often rhyme ties ideas together, but beheaded in his fist, a shopping list. Well, there's no link between the rolled up note of explanation and the shopping list, other than the fact that they're both on the man when he dies. So it's as if these objects are tied together on the man's body, but really they don't have any obvious connection with one another. Don't try and force meaning in this poem, because it's just not worth it. I mean, in many ways, it is quite a meaningless poem, and I think that's there's a reason for that. You know, all of the pairs, the couplets, all of that really seems to suggest a sense of order, when really there isn't a great deal of order in this poem. It's just stuff that the man has on him, which tells us a bit about the man, but not very much. So, what else can we say about the language of the poem? Well, it's very simple, and that's something you'll notice with Simon Armitage's poetry. There really isn't very much what we would call traditionally poetic language. It's not flowery in the way that you might traditionally expect poetry to be. It's very modern in its language. In fact, if you look on that poem, if you wrote it out in a long sentence without being broken up into stanzas, it would just seem like it was a list of items that a coroner had found on a body after it was dead. Maybe crowning one finger a ring of white unweathered skin. That's about as poetic as it gets, really. And that was everything. I think Simon Armitage ends his poems really well. That was everything. Well, that was everything to do with the man's life, or that was everything they found on him, or that was all we could learn about him. Again, it's deliberately ambiguous. So if you write about this poem, just think about as much about what Armitage leaves out as what he actually chooses to show you, because in many ways we learn very little, and that's the whole point.